So, Senator Marsha Blackburn recently laid out a pretty strong defense of the Trump administration's foreign and domestic policies. In this breakdown, we're going to unpack the core arguments she made using visuals pulled directly from her interview to see exactly how she built her case. At the very heart of her argument is this one powerful phrase: promises made, promises kept. You'll see this pop up again and again. It's really the central theme she uses to frame all of the administration's actions. So let's dig into what that actually means in practice. All right, to get a handle on this, we're going to look at 5 key areas. First, we'll tackle the central argument itself. Then we'll dive into the America First policy it's all based on. Next up, how that policy is applied to the drug crisis. We'll also look at a specific case study in Nigeria. And finally, we'll explore the contrast she draws with past strategies. So what's the big idea here? Well, the core claim being presented is that a lot of what President Trump is doing is essentially cleaning up problems she attributes to the weakness of the previous administration. Now, to build that case, the foreign policy of the last administration gets a specific label, an apology tour. This term is used to frame that approach as one that, projected weakness on the world stage. And this, she argues, created many of the issues that are supposedly now being fixed. Okay, so if the previous approach is being called an apology tour, what's the alternative being presented? Well, according to the interview, it's what's called an America First foreign policy. And what does that mean? According to the interview, this policy is really built on 3 core pillars: strength, resolve, and intentionality. The overarching goal behind it all? Well, as you can see, it's all about protecting Americans. So what does this actually look like in the real world? The interview points to a pretty concrete example down in Venezuela, going after those drug boats. This is presented as a direct application of that strength and resolve we were just talking about. But this idea of strength isn't just for foreign policy. The argument brings it right back home to domestic issues too, specifically how to handle the drug crisis. The argument really hinges on this strategic shift, which you can see perfectly captured in these changing slogans. The focus moves from "just say no to drugs," which was aimed at users, to a new focus: just say no to the drug dealers, a big pivot toward targeting the traffickers and suppliers. And the whole point of this shift? It's meant to be way more aggressive and preventative. The goal is to stop the traffickers before they can even get into the country, and in doing so, protect families from a crisis that, as the source points out, has cost hundreds of thousands of lives. Then, the argument jumps right back to foreign policy to give us another example of a so-called promise kept. This time, the focus is on a U.S. military operation in Nigeria, which is presented as a move to protect Christians living abroad. To really set the stage here, the source gives us some context on just how big this country is. Nigeria is described as a nation of 225 million people. As the interview points out, that's huge. It means 1 out of every 6 people in Africa lives in Nigeria. And within that massive population, the religious breakdown is highlighted. According to the senator, about half the country, we're talking over 100 million people, are Christians. Now, this context is really key to understanding the crisis she details. The central claim is that a terrorist group has slaughtered a just staggering number of Christians, with the senator citing estimates anywhere between 50,000 and 150,000 people. So, how is this crisis handled? Well, the source lays out a very clear sequence of events. First, you have the terrorist group attacking Christians. Second, the Nigerian government finally gave the green light for U.S. help. And third, the U.S. military was sent in with a pretty direct order: go take them out. This action is framed as more than just a military strike. It's presented as a message of hope. The argument, as you see in the quote, is that this proves to Christians and missionaries all over the world that this administration has your back and is going to be there to protect them. Okay, so this all builds up to one final, very direct comparison. The interview draws a really sharp line in the sand between the current approach and the strategy of the previous administration. And here's that comparison in its starkest terms. The way a similar crisis was handled before is described as #activism, a symbolic gesture that, according to the source, achieved essentially nothing. This is put in direct contrast with the current approach, the direct use of missiles and the might of the military. And really, to tie it all together, the big story being told here is that a policy of strength and decisive action is replacing that apology tour we talked about earlier. It's framed as a fundamental shift, moving from symbolic diplomacy to direct, hands-on intervention. And that brings us to the end of our breakdown of the arguments presented in this source. It kind of leaves us with one final big question to think about. In the incredibly complex world of international relations, how do you even define a policy of strength? And what are the metrics you use to measure if it's actually successful? Something to consider. Thanks for watching.